Okay, cool. So I am going to talk about TypeScript, and I'm also going to continue talking about GraphQL. So do you also hear this echo, or is it just me?
I'm not hearing anything on my end from it. Oh, do you have the stream up? You might be hearing the stream.
Yeah,
You
that's
might be
it.
hearing you
Let
talking
me
through the
close it.
stream. Yeah. All
Thank
right.
you. That's
Yeah, no
better.
problem. Cool.
So let me continue talking about TypeScript and also about GraphQL, which great talk previously, by the way. So I don't think I have to talk that much about the concepts of GraphQL anymore. So that's great. So Boost is actually four. So we're all React developers, I presume. And maybe some of you are already using GraphQL, or maybe some of you are already using TypeScript. And if that's the case, then that's the perfect talk for you. I'm going to show you how you can combine those two technologies and how you can make sure to get the most out of your application with the least amount of code. So let me tell a bit about myself. So I'm Roy. I'm from Amsterdam, and I'm also in Amsterdam right now. So it's almost 1 a.m. over here. So I'm going to be straight to bed after this. But before that, let me talk to you about this TypeScript and GraphQL talk. So most of my time I spent working on this open source projects for the city of Amsterdam, where I'm also located. And next to that, I really like to share content with the communities. So communities not only in Amsterdam, not only in Europe, but also in the rest of the world. And you can see that by the books that I've written so far. So so far I've written two books about React mostly and React Native, and also I've given a lot of talks um, about these technologies as well. So make sure to follow me either on Twitter or on YouTube. So yeah, let me continue with the talk. So what do you already know about TypeScript? This is actually a very important question because most of what I'm going to show you is based on TypeScript. So if you're not familiar with TypeScript, let me give you a quick intro. So TypeScript is based on types. And that's basically the most important thing to know. And also, it's a typed superset of JavaScript. And if you're not familiar with a typed superset, then it isn't that hard to understand. The typed superset basically um, means it's expanded or enhanced based on some other technology. So TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, meaning it has all the features of JavaScript, but there are some enhancement or expanded features, if you call it that way. And what's also good to know is it compiles to plain JavaScript. So if you're building something with TypeScript, what actually comes out and it goes into your browser most of the time, or maybe it's running on your server, is usually JavaScript. So your compiled code is readable by everyone, even if you don't know TypeScript. So if you look at the code on the left, it's actually what TypeScript would look like. So we've defined types, which is basically a very important thing to understand. And for those types, we've defined those fields in there. And whenever we create a function, you're going to define the types of what goes into the function and what comes out of the function. And what you see on the right is actually the way it comes out. So whenever you're compiling TypeScript, you've got some choices to make. You can compile it to ES5 or maybe to ES6. You can use CommonJS in there as well. So there are a lot of things to choose from. So TypeScript is actually just an enhancement of JavaScript. It's not like a replacement. In case it might scare you off. And it also uses the latest ECMAScript feature. So for me myself, I'm really a big fan of the latest ECMAScript features, and those are all things you can use in TypeScript. So whatever is new in JavaScript, it will also be there in TypeScript, just with the enhancement of having types. And you know what else has types? It's GraphQL, right? So TypeScript has types and GraphQL has types, meaning if you combine this, you can probably save yourself a lot of time and do some optimizations to your code. So we already saw something about GraphQL, so I'm going to be really brief with this. But GraphQL is what we call a query language for APIs. So GraphQL is not going to define, is not a framework to build APIs, or it's not a library that gives you the perfect API. It's actually just a convention, a query language, and there are libraries and APIs and frameworks to help you creating servers or APIs in that query language. So if you would look at what a query in GraphQL would look like, you can see it on the left. So we're going to ask in this situation for product information, and we're going to define the fields that we want to be returned by the API, and what's returned by the API is something you can see on the right. So you can also see it as the same structure. So we're asking for a product, and we're asking for some fields, and those fields are actually returned. So that's about a query language or GraphQL. There's way more to read about it, or way more to learn about it, but this is just the basics. And what's also important to know, it offers you a single endpoint for multiple resources. So you don't have different endpoints for every instance that you're asking for. Or what happens in REST usually is every table in your database will have its own endpoint. That's something that isn't in there for GraphQL. So it will look something like this, and you can have nested relationships like with the categories and the reviews. And it's also based on the type system, and basically compares to this. So if you're putting in information that's incorrect or has a wrong type, you will get errors just like TypeScript will give you, or just like JavaScript will give you, but then only in the browser. So you wouldn't even know something is going wrong. Those type systems, they aren't too different. So you can see TypeScript on the left and GraphQL on the right. So this is basically how those type systems compare. They're basically the same, except for the definitions of the type for like integers, because there are no integers in TypeScript, there are numbers. String is the same. And you also have relationships with other types, like with categories or with review. And they both have the probability to make them like required or optional. Those is all in there. So if you would think about this, it wouldn't be that hard to create a library or create something to help you combine those types, right? There are basically two things you can do. You can either go for something like type GraphQL, which is to make GraphQL servers, or something you can use on the front end, which I'm going to show you is GraphQL Code Generator. So basically, GraphQL Code Generator is a CLI tool that helps you generate TypeScript types from your GraphQL schema. So you don't have to own the GraphQL server that you're using, you just need the schema. And the schema is available for every GraphQL server that you're sending documents to. So let's see how that works. So this GraphQL schema is used to generate the types. And basically, it's going to map whatever you see on here to each other. So it will create TypeScript types on the right from the schema on the left. Basically, it looks something like this, but I can better show you in the code. But what it basically does is mapping the basic TypeScript types to scalar types of GraphQL, like the string or the integers and the floats. And it's also keeping the relationships to non-scalar types in there. So how does it work? Basically, some boilerplate, and I'm not going to bore you with it right now. I'm just going to show you how it works. So I've created a small React application over here. It's using GraphQL server, which I run on Code Sandbox. So there's no actual server involved. I'm just using Code Sandbox to run a GraphQL boilerplate server I created. And I've created this application. And it's not that interesting. So we can run this application. Let's see what happens. Yes, so it's running the application. It takes some time. Let's see if we've got a server running. Yes, so here's my application. It took some time. And also we have a Code Sandbox server going right here, which is basically the same query as for the UI you're seeing right here. So I'm asking product information, I'm getting titles, I'm getting offer. So think of this as sort of an Amazon where you can buy and sell products from multiple resellers. Let me enhance this. So whenever this page loads, it's going to send a request. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I need to change the. Yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So, so this is the React application I was just telling you about, and this is the actual server it's running on. So it's just the Code Sandbox, and in here you can see a query, and this is the query that returns this information that's being displayed in this UI. So nothing that interesting. So what's actually interesting is in here. So I guess I took over my screen this time. So in here I've created a component that's using React Apollo. And it's also using TypeScript, which you can see I've defined interfaces. You could have also defined types, doesn't really matter. And also I'm using a Reactadelphia query component. So using this query component, I'm going to get all the information that you can see in this UI. But as I'm using TypeScript, I have to type everything in this component. So whenever I'm using the query component from Reactadelphia, I need to define what goes in there. I need to define the structure, how it will come out there. So you can see get products is actually the return response of my data. So it will return a data object containing the products, something you can see on my server here. So we have data, we have product. So you can imagine every time I change something in my schema, I need to add new types. Or maybe this time I don't only want the title, maybe there's more information to get there as well. So whenever I delete those types again, I won't have a strongly typed application, and React, or in this situation, my React TypeScript application, it won't know what title is. So it doesn't know if title is a string, it's an integer, it could be a number, it could be a float, it could be basically whatever you want. So that's why I'm using types in there. But like I told you, it's really hard to generate types every time you need to do something. So I'm going to show you some optimizations with Graphical Code Generator on how to create those types. So in here, I've got my setup for Graphical Code Generator, and I have to find where it can find my schema. So this can be any GraphQL server that you're using. Even, GitHub has an open GraphQL server, so you can actually use GitHub schema to create types from it, which is pretty cool. And I'm also saying what kind of types I want. So I want TypeScript, I want TypeScript operations, and I also want Reactadelphia because I'm using Reactadelphia. So using this, I can just put it in the application. And then I actually created a shortcut to generate the types. And basically what it does is calling the Graphical Code Generator CLI and with the configuration I just showed you. So actually what I've done now, it parsed my configuration, it downloaded my schema somewhere in there, and it's generated outputs. So in here you can actually see what Graphical Code Generator generated for me. So basically what it generated is the type of my offer, the type of my product, which is something I can use, right? Because if we go back here, in here I've typed product, which actually is quite annoying because every time I change something in the schema, I need to change this. So let's try and just delete this and see what happens, because product should also be available in my generated file. As you can see, I'm importing product now, and I get to delete like one interface already. And probably we can do the same for your offer, right? It's already giving me errors, so should get rid of that anyway. And see if we can get the offer from somewhere. Let's get it in there as well. So now I already got myself to delete like a lot of types, and probably we can find that one in here as well. Let me see. Yeah, it's probably named differently. Either way, we could be able to find that one here as well. So it's called get products query. We can probably just get that one here, get rid of this. Just get products query, import it. No, it's not completely it, but never mind. We already got to delete two types, right? And somewhere in here will be the actual type I'm looking for. But something else I've done is I haven't only created types in here, I also created a strong typed component. And this strong type component is somewhere in here as well, and it's called getProducts component. So basically what it does, it already uses Reactadelphia, as you can see over here, like Apollo React components, and it created a component for me that I could use. So this entire boilerplate of code is something I can also import from my generated file. If you look over here, let me just get that one in here, get rid of this. See what it does. It's going to give me some errors because I've typed stuff that my component already knows. As you can see, I won't get any IDE errors. And this will also work. So now I can be able to basically delete just everything here. And this will still work, right? So let me start the application again. So we're sure. You never know, I might be lying to you. Yeah, so our application is still running. And we're using TypeScript in here, so this component is strong typed, but you don't see any type. So that's basically what Graphical Code Generator does for you. And it also has hook support. So in my code generator file, I'm using TypeScript React Apollo. So in my generated file, there should be hooks in here as well. Or I probably should define them. Either way, there's hook support as well. I probably should have defined my hooks here somewhere just to be sure that I can use hooks as well. But that's something you can define in this here. So I've just chosen to go with the components, but it should be possible to get hook support. Just double check. No, it's not in here. No, so I'm already having a Apollo React higher order component, but I don't have the hooks yet because I need to define them in my configuration. But as you can see right here, I was able to delete all my code in here that's based on TypeScript, and still I have a strongly typed component. So whenever I try to map over something right here, I would get errors because offers, actually it's a map, it's an array, but you never know it's an array until you're actually running the code. So with TypeScript, you can prevent those errors. So basically, if you want to know more about this, you can find me on Twitter. And also, like I told you, on YouTube. And definitely make sure to check out the Graphical Code Generator project here as well, because there's a lot of stuff you can do. So let me zoom it in a bit. So what Helpia does is it's React Apollo hook support, the one I couldn't find just yet because you need to define it here schema with the configuration with hooks. But also if you aren't using GraphQL or maybe using Urql, which is also a great component, a great library for using GraphQL in your React project, they can still auto-generate everything, all your components and your hooks based on your schema. So yeah, make sure to check out this project. And yeah, if you've got any questions, make sure to ask them to me.
So, I mean, I definitely am sold after that. I mean, like, I definitely stayed away from it just because I didn't want to slow myself up during development.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely found myself hitting roadblocks of just typing out my data in GraphQL properly, and I didn't want to also deal with that same thing, you know, trying to write UIs quickly. But I think something like this really, because I've been moving towards the stack of, you know, Next.js, you know, React Apollo with Apollo Server Micro and things of that nature. And I didn't want to put anything in my way, but I think this is something that really kind of takes that completely out of the problem and really puts it into a position where anything I build is extremely safe to use and I know it'll continue running well, you know, in production.
Yeah, that's basically the idea about it. So in the beginning, probably you're using any everywhere because you don't want to type your schema every time
Right.
because you're changing a lot of things. So for those situations, it's like the perfect solution.
Exactly. Roy, thank you again, man. I really appreciate you, especially you know, I know what time it is for you, my man. Go get some sleep. And you know, we'll definitely be reposting this. Everybody in the chat is literally ecstatic about using some GraphQL and some types right now. So I really appreciate your talk, man.
Nice. Thanks a lot. Have a good
See ya.
night.
Have a good one.